Okay, so musical context-wise, what is going on when Peter Green is playing this intro solo, and how is the song structured? Now, this is an example. This song has a bluesy feel. I would certainly characterize it as a blues song, but it is obviously not a typical blues song. It is a sweet kind of ballad, a sort of blues ballad, I think is probably what best described it, at least in my mind. And so we are going to encounter a chord progression that is slightly different to many that you might encounter in sort of standard 12-bar blues progressions. The song is in the key of A major, so it's built around that A major chord. It's not built around a dominant 7th chord as we might typically encounter when thinking about the blues. So we've got that major sound rather than the slightly more tense kind of bluesy dominant 7th sound. The progression then cycles through actually more chords than we would normally encounter in a 12-bar blues. So it's built from that A major and includes a variety of chords that appear when you harmonize the notes of the major scale. So it's a diatonic chord progression. Green does include some bluesier elements by turning chords that would naturally be major chords into dominant 7th chords, and that certainly gives the progression a slightly bluesier feel. But that is kind of fundamentally what's happening. We are not in that 12-bar blues territory. We're in something a little bit more complicated and sophisticated. It's also worth noting that in the actual track, all of this is played by a string section. So Green and Danny Cohen and the other members of Fleetwood Mac, they're not playing, chords to support what the solo part, what Green is doing. That's all happening with strings, which again gives this song a kind of sweeter, that kind of sweet ballad feel as opposed to a more guitar-driven blues rock feel. But we can have fun sort of looking at the chords, learning them, and you can create a very nice sound and feel playing, without accompaniment by arpeggiating the chords, which is often, I think, the best way to approximate what's happening, without having a string section to support you. So the chords that we've got, we're going to start on the A major. We then go to an A7, so we turn that into a dominant 7th chord, and that gives it that kind of bluesy feel. Then moves to a D major. Then to a D diminished, so this kind of what sounds like a pretty tense and, not the sweetest sounding chord by itself, but a chord that works very, very well in the context of this progression because it pushes us harmonically back to the 1 chord. It creates a very kind of strong pull that leads us back to the beginning. So after that, we resolve from this chord back to the A major. And that's a very nice kind of harmonic movement there, and one that appears not just in this song, but in many different blues songs. Before You Accuse Me by Eric Clapton is another example. I've linked that below where you hear this movement. It is something that as you get more into chord progressions and more complex chord progressions, you will encounter. So we've just moved back to that A major. We then move down to an F sharp minor, then a B minor, E7, and that's a naturally occurring dominant chord in the key of A major, but gives it that kind of nice bluesy feel. So we're going to play the E7, A, back to A, D, A, and then back to the E7. Now, you can just play those as chords, and if you do, you obviously want to be quite subtle and sweet in your approach as you put them together. And there's tabs for this below, so you can see the number of bars that we play each chord for and how things switch. Or, if you want to, you can arpeggiate the chords. So rather than just sticking on the A major and playing and so on, we can arpeggiate, which essentially means playing across the chord. So picking out notes of the chord and playing through it, like this. And so on. That, I think, is the best way to approximate the rhythm section of this song. And it's also a really nice way of building up your skills of moving through these slightly more complex chord changes and a kind of more frequent chord changes, because we're not sticking in that 12-bar blues structure of staying on the one chord for 4 bars and then shifting. There are more shifts and some more complex shifts with the fretting hand. So it definitely will help to bring up your skills kind of playing through and moving around chords. And it'll also build up your ability to pick through chords and be precise in playing those different strings and not scuffing different strings, but kind of, again, you know, being quite rhythmic and dum 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 dum, precise in your approach as you play through them. So I think that's a really nice skill to cultivate and work on before we kind of dive into the intro solo. As well, you know, sort of harmonically, it's introducing you to more complex chord patterns and progressions outside of just that kind of 1-4-5 dominant-based major blues sound. Now, from a lead guitar perspective, what this is going to be sort of leading us to is soloing and thinking about using the A major pentatonic scale for the majority of our playing here. Now, there are some different approaches and things that we can pull into our playing as we sort of solo over this progression, and we'll cover that a little later in the course when we look at improvisational approaches. However, we want to be thinking A major pentatonic, and this is why this song works so well if you're looking to break away or move beyond kind of the A minor pentatonic or the minor blues scale framework. The reason that we're using that major pentatonic is because we are predominantly playing over an A major chord. Whilst Green does kind of throw the A7 in there and mix things up a little bit, the home base, the tonal home base for this song is A major. And so if you start to solo with using A minor, which might be the first place your head goes, you're going to create a slight clash and a bit of tension with certain notes that clash between the scale and what's found in the chord. When you're playing in a major blues context, so A major 7, that tension already exists within the chord itself. So if you're playing an A major blues, A minor pentatonic works great, sounds brilliant. But when you're playing over a pure major chord, we have to adjust our approach slightly. So we're going to be thinking about A major pentatonic scale. And that's what we'll be diving into in a bit more detail later on. But that is essentially mostly what Green is doing when he's soloing. He's using the A major pentatonic scale, and as noted, he's kind of focusing it around this B.B. King box, which we'll cover in more detail in the next few lessons. Hope that all makes sense. If not, if you've got any questions about the theory or the chord progression or, you know, the voicings used, it's worth noting that I just chose the voicings that I think work best and are kind of most economical here. But if you want to know about different voicings or different ways to play this, or maybe a more simplified chord progression, please do let me know. I've put as much detail as possible in the course materials below, but I'm also always around and happy to help should you have any questions. Otherwise, when you're ready, head over to the next lesson where we're going to be looking at tone, how Green dials in this beautiful and crisp blues tone, how we've done it in the studio, and how you can approximate the same sort of sound on your side. Good luck, guys, and I'll see you in the next lesson.